Mr. Joshua Jeffries, Josh, 11, had been living with Gail on and off since he was a child. His mother, Patricia Jeffries, battled drug addiction and was unable to care for Josh and his older sister, Leanna. Rather than waiting for Child Protective Services to intervene, Patricia sought assistance from a close friend, Gail. Gail took on the responsibility of raising Josh and Leanna, despite the fact that Patricia made regular child support payments to her. Gail, who had 2 older children, adored Josh and his sister and treated them like her own. When it came to raising children, she considered herself to be a bit of a mother tiger. She was very protective of them and did everything she could to keep them away from anyone she thought might be a bad influence. Joshua Jeffries, 11, decided to go to bed around 10 p.m. on Thursday, August 9, 2001. It was a warm night, so Gail Hefford, the boy's guardian, decided to leave the back door of their Portland, Oregon, home open to allow air to circulate throughout the house. It was a decision she would come to regret later. What happened that night is still a mystery. Josh stumbled into Gail's bedroom around 4:20 a.m. Friday and said, "Auntie Gail, someone came into my room." Gail was perplexed by what was going on. He crunched his little face, picked up his little arms, and slid down. Gail jumped out of bed and turned on the light as Josh collapsed on the floor. She realized Josh was covered in blood at that point. At 4:23 a.m., Gail called 911. She told the operator that she wasn't sure what had happened, but she suspected Josh had been stabbed because she hadn't heard any gunshots. Within minutes, paramedics arrived and rushed Josh to Oregon Health and Science University Hospital, where doctors quickly realized there was nothing they could do to save the youngster. At 5:02 a.m., Josh was pronounced dead. Josh died from a single gunshot wound. According to an autopsy, the bullet entered his upper back and exited just under his left arm. The medical examiner determined that he was lying down and was most likely asleep when he was shot. Detectives in Portland struggled to find a motive for Josh's murder from the start of their investigation. Josh was a friendly child with no known enemies. He had never been involved in a fight or argument at school and was well liked by his classmates. He had no involvement in any criminal activity. He didn't hang out with anyone who did drugs or belonged to a gang. It was incomprehensible to his loved ones that he had been shot dead in his own bedroom. The detectives were determined to bring Josh to justice. The deaths of young people who were not involved in criminal activity are disturbing, Portland Police Chief Mark Craker told reporters. The police department's top priority was to find the murderer. Investigators scoured the home where Josh was murdered, hoping to find a clue to the murderer's identity. Josh's room was at the back of the house, in what had previously been the laundry room. The house's back door was right in his room. Anyone entering through that door would have been only a few feet away from his bed. When Josh was shot, there were 3 other people in the house. Gail and her partner, Diane Lovett, slept in the front bedroom. Neither woman remembered hearing anything out of the ordinary before Josh woke them up. "I woke up to Josh running in my room saying that someone had come in the back door," Gail said again. Leanna Jeffries, Josh's 18-year-old sister, slept in a small bedroom separated from Josh's by the kitchen. She dozed off around midnight and hadn't heard anything until Josh screamed. Although there were no signs of forced entry, Gail admitted that they had left the back door open and the screen door unlocked. "It was hot, and we left it open," Diane lamented. "We now wish we hadn't." Detectives interviewed Gail, Diane, and Leanna extensively. Each woman willingly submitted to a polygraph examination and was cleared of any involvement in Josh's murder. Gail's adult daughter, who lived in a camper in the backyard, was also interrogated and cleared. Investigators canvassed Josh's Brentwood Darlington neighborhood, interviewing residents and asking if anyone saw or heard anything unusual that Friday morning. One neighbor told detectives that he was working on his computer around 4:20 p.m. when he heard what sounded like a gunshot, followed by dogs barking and a person screaming for someone to call 911. "I heard a shot that sounded a little muffled. I couldn't pinpoint where it was coming from." Joe Anderson, a neighbor, told investigators that he and his wife had not heard anything unusual before Josh was killed. We were awake all night because we have a newborn, but all we heard was police running through our backyard. We thought they were chasing someone. Detectives were no closer to finding the murderer 3 weeks after Josh was killed. The Carroll Son Carrington Memorial Foundation offered a $10,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of the person responsible for Josh's death in the hopes of generating new leads. "He's an innocent 11-year-old boy," said Kim Peterson, executive director of the foundation. "Anyone who could commit such a heinous crime is a threat to the community. He can do it if he can do it once." Although a few tips came in, investigators were unable to develop any solid suspects. In November 2001, officials held a press conference to update the public on the murder investigation. They admitted that they had no suspects and were unable to determine a motive for the crime. According to Portland Police Detective Shirley McLaughlin, it could have been a case of mistaken identity. It is possible that someone else was the intended victim. Months passed with no progress on the case. Despite the fact that the neighborhood was rife with rumors about who might have committed the crime, detectives had little evidence to back up any particular theory. Many people seemed to believe Josh had been murdered by mistake, but no one knew who the intended victim could have been. Ruth Miller, who lived next door to Josh's house, told police that she suspected the murderer was a family member. "There are 3 dogs who constantly bark at everyone, including me. There's no way someone could have entered that house as a stranger without my knowledge." Gail did have 3 dogs: Roswell, a Rottweiler who liked to snarl at everyone, Seema, a little dachshund who would yap at everyone, and Winston, an elderly basset hound, but they were kept inside overnight and hadn't barked prior to the crime. Both Portland police and residents of the Brentwood-Darlington neighborhood admitted to a drug problem in the area. There were a lot of methamphetamine users as well as a lot of meth dealers in the neighborhood. One of the reasons Gail had been so protective of Josh was because of this. She made it clear to him that drugs and guns were not acceptable. And she wouldn't let him hang out with anyone in the neighborhood she suspected of being involved in the drug trade. Josh had a strict curfew and was expected to be home by 5:45 p.m. every day to eat dinner. He was always on time. Friends confirmed that Josh had been a good kid who had been unaffected by the criminal activity in the neighborhood. Some wondered, however, if Josh had seen something he wasn't supposed to see, leading to his death, to keep him quiet. Those who spent time with Josh in the hours before the murder said everything seemed normal. Josh spent the majority of the day playing at a friend's house before returning to Gail's house for dinner with his family. He'd gone back to his friend's house after dinner for a few hours before returning home at 8:30 p.m. He was in a good mood when he got home, and nothing seemed to bother him. He went to bed after watching a movie and eating a snack. Patricia, Josh's biological mother, was convinced that Josh was not the intended victim of the murderer and pleaded with him to turn himself in. He was only a child. How can they walk down the street knowing they got the wrong person and killed a child? Months passed, and Josh's assailant remained unidentified. "Someone took my child's life," Gail said in a 2003 interview. "We'd like to know who. We want to finish this so that we can rest and Josh can rest." She was enraged that the murderer was still on the loose. "It's a monster, not a person. I want him apprehended right now. Actually, I wanted him apprehended on August 10, 2001. After sifting through all of the rumors surrounding the case, investigators were left with almost nothing. Portland Police Detective Meredith Hopper admitted that no evidence pointed to a specific person. "I've always suspected that the intended target was someone else. Detectives looked into it extensively, we're still looking into it, but nothing has come up." Gail told a reporter in 2008 that she was still hoping for justice for Josh. "That was the most tragic day of my life," he said. "The perpetrator kidnapped an innocent child. He doesn't have the right to be out there celebrating with his family and having fun." Gail suffered from a number of serious health issues, including diabetes and congenital heart disease. Unfortunately, her health deteriorated in the years following the murder, and she died in 2015, never learning who killed Josh. Josh's case is still open, but it has been dormant for over a decade. Detective Hopper told reporters that investigators were still hopeful of solving the case and that someone would come forward with the information required for an arrest. It's just critical to provide closure to the family, especially in light of this heinous crime. Please contact the Portland Police Department's Cold Case Homicide Unit at 5038230400 if you have any information about Josh's murder. What are your thoughts on the Joshua Jeffries case? I really appreciate your input. Thank you for taking the time to watch. Be a part of the Chris Crime Diaries family and hit the subscribe button now.